The everlasting slippers. It is related that there was once in Cairo a druggist named Abu Qasim, who was celebrated for the events. Though Allah granted him riches and popularity in the trade, he lived and dressed like a poorest beggar. His game wore a vast collection of rents and straps. His turban was so old and dirty that it was possible to tell this original color. But for all he wore, his slipper was the most notorious witness of his meanness. They were not only studded with great nails and armored like a machine of war, he had stole nails 1,000 times until they were as thick as the head of a hippopotamus. But their upper were so patched that for 20 years one of the chief lobber of the cleverest scholar and courtiers in Cairo had been to keep his compatriots from. Abu Qasim's slippers were so heavy that they had become provable throughout all Egypt. When a guest stayed too long, they would say to him, "His manners are as heavy as Abu Qasim's slipper." Then a Pentecost school master tried to be funny. They would say to him, "His waist is as heavy as Abu Qasim's slipper." Porters would say that and say to their lord it was heavy as Abu Qasim's slipper. When a nasty old woman in a harem would stop her master's wives from playing together, they would say, "She is as heavy as Abu Qasim's slipper." When a man ate ingestible food and felt a temper rising in his belly, he would say, "Allah persuades me that meat was as heavy as Abu Qasim's slipper." In fact, flock would drag in Abu Qasim's slipper in 1,000 connections when heaviest was in the question. One day, Abu Qasim made an unusual good bargain in his business, but instead of giving some little fast as machinists do when Allah has particularly favored him, he determined, by way of celebration, to visit the hammam when he had not set his foot in a memory of man. He shut his shop and set forth, carrying his slipper on his back to save their use. When he was arrived at the hammam, he left them on the threshold and all of their fugger and entered to take his bath. Abu Qasim's skin was so penetrated with filth that the robber was a long time in completing their labors upon him, and it was not until sunset that he was ready to depart. When he went forth, he discovered that his slippers were missing, and that an adequate pair of carrion yellow leather stood in their place. Allah must have all known that I have often thought of buying a pair like this, said Abu Qasim to himself. Or perhaps someone has exchanged this with me by accident. Delighted at his saving of expense, he put on the yellow slippers and departed. As a matter of fact, the yellow slipper belonged to the Qadi, who was still in the hammam. Also, the slipper guard had found Abu Qasim moisturizer firm and skim on the threshold, and had hidden them in an old corner. Then, as his duty was over of that day, he had returned home without thinking of replacing them. When the Qadi had finished his bath, he observed attending searching everywhere for his slipper, but he could only find Abu Qasim's fabulous footwear, which they instantly recognized. They set out in pursuit and brought him back to the hammam, with the missing property hanging about his neck. The Adid exchanged slipper with Abu Qasim and sent him to prison, where he was obtained to pay the officers an enormous bribe before he could get free. As soon as he returned to his shop, he crushed his luckiest slipper and threw them into the Nile to get rid of them. A few days forwards, a certain fisherman with a great difficulty pulled the nails to shore and found them laden with Abu Qasim's slipper. The nails which has seriously damaged that mess. They ran to Abu Qasim's shop and violently threw the slipper inside. With the crash of their unlucky owner, the slipper locked down a large quantity of flax containing rosewater and rice essence, and smashed each into 1,000 pieces. The grief of Abu Qasim knew no bound, and he cried, "Ill-molded slipper, daughters of my heirs, you shall do no more harm." So he went out into the garden and began to dig a hole in which to bury them. But one of his neighbors, who had a guarded against him, ran to the well and informed him that Abu Qasim had dug up a hidden treasure in his garden. Without responding it, the well believed this, as it craved his knowledge of Abu Qasim, so he sent off to the unfortunate druggist. And in spite of the poor man's oath that he was only buying his slipper, made his disgust large sums of money. At this point, Zahrazad saw that the approach of morning and discreetly fell silent. She said, "Abu Qasim thought his breath in despair and walked with his slipper far into the country, meaning to see that the last of them at all costs. After walking for many hours, he threw them into a canal and returned home, supposing that he would never hear of them again. But as ill luck would have it, the current of the water carried the slipper down to the Nile, which was served by the canal. They were formally stopped its working by being caught in the wheel. The owner of the mill ran to repair the damage and found an enormous object caught in the ground, which they immediately recognized as Abu Qasim's slippers. At their instigation, the druggist was heavily fined to make a good damage and again threw into passion. He came forth after richly paying the officer, and his slipper were returned to him at his gate. He walked home in a state bordering upon madness, and placing the slipper behind him on the trees so that he might not see them, and placing them on a plateau, and began to consider deeply what he should do with them. While he was concentrating, a dog belonging to one of the neighbors saw the slipper and leapt from the own rage to the Abu Qasim, took one of them in his jaw and began to play with it. In the course of casting it to and fro to the watch animals set in flying over the bow thread, and it fell upon the head of an old woman who was passing through. Its enormous weight crushed the old woman flat, and if she has been made of paper, and her various scratches Abu Qasim's slipper appeared before the Qadi, damaging either the piece of vacant blood of the death of Abu Qasim. The poor druggist was obtained to pay the full sum demanded by law, and also to give a massive bribe to the police in order to escape being sent to prison for a third time. In the last calamity told him what to do. He went home, took the flat slipper, and returned to the Qadi. When he was in the presence, he felt the slipper above his head, and carried on furiously that the Qadi could not forbid to smile. "Behold, my lord, the course of all my tribulations. Because of them I shall hand forward them to my bag." Therefore, I intend you to make a formal announcement that Abu Qasim no longer owns any slipper, and it is not responsible for anything which any slipper may do in the future. So saying, he handed the slipper into the middle of the hall and ran towards barefooted, leaving all who were in the court fallen upon him, backside and shake with laughter. But Allah knows all. And Shahrazad said again. The Thousand Nights and One Night, page 520. Bahlul the Jester. It is related that the Khalifa Harun al-Rashid kept a jester in his place to deserve the moments of dark humor. His jester was called Bahlul the Wise. One day, the Khalifa asked him, "O Bahlul, do you know how many fools there are in Baghdad?" "It would be a long list, my lord," answered Bahlul. "Yet I bet you make it and make it exactly," cried Harun. Bahlul gave a long laugh and then replied, "As I have no taste of heavy work, I would make you out of a list the wise men in Baghdad. Those who do not appear will be the fools." This same Bahlul climbed up on to the Khalifa's throne one day during the absence and refers a volley of balls from the officers for his temporarity. The Sultan came upon him weeping hot tears and tried to console him. Bahlul said, "O consider of the faithful, I do not weep for myself. I cringe because I have consulted how many balls with you downstairs." This same Bahlul refused a present for 1,000 dirhams, which was Khalifa offered twice. So Harun asked him the reason of this distinction. "For also," answered Bahlul, stretched out his legs. The Khalifa faced. Seeing his surprisement marks it infinitely, the chief ensured would have taken the jester up and beaten him. But all Rashid before him and questioned Bahlul concerning his great lack of respect. "My lord," answered the justice, "if I had stretched out my hands to receive your present, I would have forbidden the right to stretch out my legs." One day, as al-Rashid was returning from a warlike expedition, Bahlul extended his tent and found the Khalifa perched with thirst and calling for water. The jester hastened to fetch a cup of water and give it to him, saying, "O commander of the faithful, before you drink, pray tell me how much you would have given for this cup of water if you had been difficult to preach." "I would have given my half kingdom," answered the Rashid as he drank. "And now that you have drunk," went on Bahlul, "supposing this cup of water refused to leave your body, owing to some refund on the part of your honorable blade, what would you pay to see it safely forth?" "Surely half of my kingdom," answered al-Rashid. Then said Bahlul, "I suppose, my lord, that an empire which would you bought for a cup of water and a jet of speed is worse than